right, you ready to do this?
Let's do this thing.
I'm Kristen Howerton. I blog at Rage Against the Minivan, and I consider myself a liberal social democrat.
I am Paul Martin. I blog at paulosophia.com. I consider myself a moderate Republican.
So we are doing a weekly chat about politics. Thank you for joining us. This election, man, it's like watching a good football game.
Yes.
Where you want your team to win, but you don't want them to be totally spanked.
Right.
And it's like this election is so fascinating because it's so unpredictable.
It's so unpredictable, and I'm going to be bummed when there are two candidates because the primaries are the game. It's kind of like, I think in NFL football, there's the weekend before the Super Bowl where there are 4 teams playing, and that's said to be the best day. And these primaries are unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And I mean, America is really, I'm shocked at the New Hampshire primary where you have Trump, who for many reasons does not, to me, represent Republican ideals. And I'm sure that you agree with that too.
Absolutely.
You know, the Republican Party, which has been such a stalwart of like Christian, evangelical, and you've got Trump who
pro-life.
Trump who doesn't really resonate with a lot of those values.
Right.
And then you've got Bernie Sanders, who's a socialist.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's intriguing, and I don't know if we'll ever have an election like this, but just having two candidates, Sanders and Trump, who have this populist message, which, that's a big word, and some people don't know what it means. It just means they just speak words that the masses would think of as vital and just we're going to solve unemployment. And Trump was talking the other day about how unemployment is up to 40%. That's his number that he's using. And we're going to beat China, we're going to beat Japan, we're going to beat Mexico. What does that even mean? But it resonates with people's angst.
Yeah. Well, and both of them are very anti-establishment, which I think is interesting because if you look at the two of them, they couldn't be more different in some ways, but there is an undertone of being against politics as usual.
Right.
So there is some similarity there as well.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about this morning. We've talked a lot about how the two parties seem to just get more and more polarized.
Right.
And these two are, really different.
Yeah.
I watched a campaign video for Bernie Sanders this week. Did you happen to see that one?
I think I did.
It was a total tearjerker. I bawled while I'm watching it.
Wow.
I mean, very effective marketing.
Right. They must have a great producer for that video.
Totally. To get me emotional as me, check. It worked. But it was about it was basically about coming together, and it was showing all of these different faces of different races, different people, and it was saying, black, white, Hispanic, LGBT, this is our country, and the whole message was bringing us together.
Right.
And then you've got Trump, who I feel is using coded language to basically say, let's get the people with brown skin, keep them out.
Yeah, and that's
what a big difference.
It is a difference, and it's a whole new, because you have Hillary, who's a more traditional Democrat, and I think she has integrity, at least in her career, of doing things to legislate and to accept and welcome people of various. Where Sanders, it's just such an idealistic message. I mean, again, it's great, and it produces tears, but what I think many Americans don't understand about either Trump or Sanders is they still have to get bills passed in Congress. But it seems like the general electorate has forgotten that we have a thing called balance of powers. Trump says, I'm going to build a wall, and you could just see people cheering. I heard them cheering. But they don't understand that it's not his company.
It's not his call.
Where he could just go say, we're going to go build this wall. He has to unless he's going to spend the money himself. But it seems like people are just oblivious to the reality that a President Trump would have to, he'd need Congress to get stuff done.
And that is true of Sanders as well, to be fair. I mean, we saw how difficult it was for President Obama to pass what isn't even nationalized health care. No matter what people want to say about it, that is not nationalized health care.
It's not.
So, if Bernie wants to come in and put that in place and put, free college in place, that's going to be an uphill battle.
Right.
I will say, though, that some of the messaging and the ideals I think that Bernie is preaching, were he president, I do think would affect the mindset of our country. Because you look at what's happening in Canada, and they've got a very liberal president right now. And he is really preaching a message of acceptance. And
Right.
you saw the way that they responded to refugees
Yeah,
from
it's
Syria.
amazing.
And it's like, I feel like there is that top-down messaging where he's affecting the country in the way that they think and feel.
Right.
But
why,
again,
he's Jewish, why wouldn't he be hated, castigated in the same way that President Obama? I mean, they wouldn't be able to accuse him of being a Muslim. They wouldn't be able to accuse him
Right.
of being born in Kathmandu or wherever they say he was born. Joke, but I don't know where they say
Yeah.
he was born. So they wouldn't be able to criticize him based on the color of his skin or on being a Muslim. He's Jewish. But wouldn't he, at the end of the day, still be thrown? I mean, if Hillary or Bill Clinton are loathed and despised by the right, why wouldn't Sanders?
why isn't Sanders as despised?
Yeah, or why wouldn't a President Sanders suffer the exact same kind of?
He very well might.
Yeah.
He very well
Yeah,
might.
and what's intriguing about Trump is that he is not a social conservative, and this is what baffles me. You know, I'm a Christian, and I have hundreds and hundreds of Christian friends who seem to be, the abortion issue seems to be the biggest issue to many of them, and they're voting for Trump, who has been adamantly pro-choice his entire career up until this election, pretty much. 3 wives. He's a complete philanderer. That's not a secret. He's quoted. He's on record of talking about his sexual exploits, and you have Christian evangelicals, just falling over in his wake. It is more baffling to me than anything I've seen.
You and me both.
Yeah.
But you know what? To your question of why is Bernie maybe not getting the same vitriol, I also think he's a white man. I mean, there's just a reality of, there's not the xenophobia given to him that there is going to be to President Obama. Just that latent racism I think is not present.
And what's intriguing, another thing that's intriguing in this race is Hillary now has 3 investigations going on.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so she, there's this email issue, which of course she paints as a right-wing conspiracy. Pretty much anything that her or her husband have been accused of is a right-wing conspiracy. But people need to know that her investigations are not being undertaken by Newt Gingrich or Dick Cheney. They're being all 3 of them are being undertaken. 2 of them by the Department of Justice and one by the FBI. And so these are not, in the Department of Justice, this is the Obama administration.
Right.
And so 2 of the investigations, state and FBI, on the email server. And yesterday there was a new investigation opened by State Department on the Clinton Foundation. And so, I mean,
which is
should
not
we be depressed when we have
her,
Trump and Clinton possibly becoming our candidates with such...
Well, what do you think the outcome will be if she's indicted on any of these?
Well, I mean, apparently what's happening, at least in the FBI, I read a report that if the powers that be, the Democratic powers that be, turn a blind eye, it's kind of like Watergate.
Right.
If they find hard evidence, and it sounds like there could be some, that she violated her security breach, and if the Democratic powers that be turn a blind eye, that the FBI will fall apart. It will be like Watergate, where senior officials will just say, "We're not doing this. We have hard evidence," and
interesting.
It is, but I mean, and this is why I think people like John Kasich, who had a remarkable showing in New Hampshire, he has the most positive message by far of any of the candidates. I mean, that man will not go negative, and his numbers were. He came in 3rd, I believe, in New Hampshire, and I heard his speech, and he said something. Metaphorically biblical, but he said, "The light overcomes the darkness," and he was referring to the darkness as this Donald Trump hate.
Yes.
This Bernie Sanders anger and wrath, and it's a different kind of wrath. Of course, I would applaud Sanders because he's nothing like Trump. But it was such a positive, uplifting message, and
So Rubio got a little takedown in the Republican debate.
Oh my gosh! So I'm a bit of a presidential debate junkie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ride dirt bikes or surf, but I do sit home oftentimes and
Nerd alert.
and Nerd Alert, YouTube, and of course you have the Nixon Kennedy 1960 debate, which was classic for many reasons. First television debate. My favorite of all time was the Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, when Bush checked his watch in the middle of the debate, and this African American woman asked the question, and Bush HW gave some random theoretical answer, and then Clinton walks up and just like magic connects with her, and that was the end of the election. Well, Chris Christie, who's a federal prosecutor, was appointed by George W. Bush after 9/11. You know, these federal prosecutors, these are guys, you know, putting their kids in public schools so they could put bad guys in jail. They're the best of the best. And he took it to Marco Rubio. Rubio gave an answer, and he was repeating. It's funny, last week I talked about how Rubio stayed on message. Well, he stayed on message too much, and Christie just said, you know, you're giving these 20-second sound bites, and Rubio got rocked in the exchange. He did it again. He gave the same soundbite about Obama and how he knows exactly what he's doing. And then Christie rocks him again. Rubio does it a third time, and while he says it, Christie leans forward and says, people, there he goes again. And Rubio, who was rising to the top, plummeted. And many think his campaign's over.
Wow.
It was one of those moments. And Christie, it was kind of a suicide attack because he went out of the race a couple days later.
Which may be to the detriment of the Republican Party, because Rubio, at least... Yeah. So who have we lost this week?
So Carly Fiorina dropped out after New Hampshire, and Chris Christie dropped out. And so now you have this heated South Carolina primary coming up. Apparently, what I'm reading is that in South Carolina, it's, you know, in New Hampshire, in the Northeast, you have to be more sophisticated and proper, but in South Carolina, the gloves come off. And so they're expecting, on the Republican side, a remarkably dirty campaign, if you can imagine anything more dirty than what we've had. And Jeb Bush is now suddenly starting to rise, and it's interesting, Trump is attacking Bush so much, and he's talking about how his poll numbers are low, but it just makes me wonder, why is he attacking Bush so much?
He probably sees him as a potential threat. I mean, the bottom line is the Republicans have not come down to two candidates yet, which is problematic. But at some point, don't you think that's going to happen? And then there will be a clear contender to Trump, because so far it's just been sort of like this piecemeal.
And it's
he knows it's coming.
He knows it's coming, and it's narrowing. I have a prediction, people. I have a prediction.
Tell?
I will tell. My prediction is that when we come down to two candidates, or maybe even three, that Trump will not be able to. He will not be able to perform in the debates. Because he doesn't speak any specifics. He's generally talking to people that have no understanding of the political system at all. So he says things like, we're going to build a wall, and we're going to beat China. And people are saying, go, go, go. But when you get to the real policy issues that, you know, these issues are complex, I don't think he'll be able to sit across from John Kasich or Jeb Bush in an hour-and-a-half debate. You know?
When it's just one other person and there's a lot more energy and attention on you. I also, and I hope that this is true, because otherwise my faith in humanity is in question, but I also think a part of the reason he has risen is that the Republican Party is just so disorganized in figuring out who they're going to be behind. So there's so many moderates like you that are just kind of all over the place. Trump has like kind of established his base, but no one else has. So there's a big split vote.
And who would have ever thought? And like you said, the idea of a socialist nominee for the self-proclaimed socialist. And there's debate as to whether he's, you know, a socialist in the true sense of the word. But it does speak of the division again. I mean, you're a good person. I know you well, and you adhere to the socialistic ideology, earnestly believing that it would be the best thing for our country. And I respect that. But evidently, millions of Americans agree with you. Who would have ever thought?
I agree. I do agree that it is astounding to me, and makes me feel hopeful that enough Americans could go, okay, this word socialism is not communism. It's not what we were taught as a kid, like socialist. Like it's an insult. Like I think more and more people are starting to like look around them and travel and understand, like, okay, there are many other countries that have a democratic process and a socialist, you know, sort of environment.
As a person of faith, what's your main reason for socialism? I don't think I've asked you before. Do you have like a couple?
You know, if you look at and first of all, I'm not a huge fan of saying everything that happens in government has to be biblical. So I do believe in separation of church and state. But going back to just my core values as a Christian, I believe that Jesus really taught that we are to take care of one another. And so if I want to establish that core value in the government, and I don't think that that's a mandate for the government to do it, but at the same time, I personally think having the government do it is the most effective way as a citizen of, a country that I think runs relatively well, can run relatively well.
Right.
I think empowering our government to take care of the people and being a part of a system that does that, to me, is the best way to do that.
Right.
Because the churches are, everyone says, like, that should be in the hands of the churches. Well, we're not doing that. Churches are not paying for college. Churches are not paying for the uninsured.
Right.
It's just not happening.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And I would, though I see those merits, I generally believe, and this is so nuanced, but I generally believe that people are better off with less government.
Yeah.
And that we can get into an entitled state to the degree that government oversteps its bounds.
Yeah.
And in the best situation, people are out flourishing, making money, running businesses without government interference. But of course, the problem now is that's not happening. And the middle class has shrunk down.
Yeah.
And without that, there is no Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
But it is an absolute empirical fact that over the past few decades, the middle class is just shrinking down.
Yeah.
Trump seems to find the remedy in, we're going to beat China, whatever that might mean. With the limited powers he has as the president, we're going to beat China, we're going to beat Mexico. Oh, by the way, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. He says this.
Sure.
Mexico is going to pay for the $8 billion wall.
And I'm going to get a pony for Christmas.
That's right. Totally. And the former president of Mexico said a few days ago, no, we're not. But people, they foam at the mouth, thinking, oh my gosh, he's the most amazing man. He's going to build a wall that'll keep immigrants out, and he's going to send an invoice to Mexico for $8 billion. But he's going about the solution in a whole different way.
But see, I don't think that Trump gives a shit about the middle class. I think that is lip service that he'll say now because he needs the middle class's vote.
Right.
But, you look at Bernie Sanders, he's built a career out of being exceptionally concerned about the middle class and the people living in poverty.
Right.
Trump does not, this is all completely new rhetoric for him. I don't think it's of interest to him really at all. I think he'll be elected and he will continue to look after his own interests as a very wealthy white man.
Right, and it's just a matter of fact. With 4 bankruptcies, with thousands of employees, he walked away from many of them. In his career.
Yeah, that's right.
Who were $15 an hour construction workers. So he would have a hard trouble in terms of integrity. But people don't seem to care about integrity these days. With
not
respect
with
to Trump.
him. No, they do not. That is not a big concern. Yeah. All right, last topic, race. So this has been a big conversation especially in the Democratic primaries, that people are saying Hillary really needs the black vote in order to win.
Yeah.
And there's some conversation around who should black people be lending their support to, which at the end of the day really isn't for a bunch of white people to say.
Right.
But at the same time, it is a consideration that they're both going to have to figure out how to get. Right.
Yeah, and she, has that constituency by 60-70% nationally, and of course Bill Clinton is a darling of the African American community, but Sanders is using again this issue of wage disparity, and saying that even President Obama, Sanders said I think yesterday that he would do more for the African Americans than President Obama has, using the argument that President Obama has pandered to corporate America to the detriment of the African Americans. And so Sanders is working very hard to win that constituency. If Hillary, and it's interesting the metrics behind these things. If Sanders could just pick up, 10-20% of the national, then he could win the nomination. And so.
I have to say, I definitely follow a lot of leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement on Twitter and things, and I am definitely seeing a lot of surprising support for Sanders from some of the people that I kind of look to in terms of race issues. And the woman who wrote a book called The New Jim Crow just wrote an article really kind of lambasting Hillary on her history of some race baiting in the past. And this, this is in the distant past, but I don't know. I definitely feel, personally, as a mother of 2 black children, I feel like Bernie is really invested, whereas I feel like Hillary is trying to get votes. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but
yeah. And what's remained striking, I mean, we've said this already, but just the amount of baggage, you know, and I wonder, there are some big paradoxes. So you have Clinton with so much baggage going back 30 years.
That's true.
Sanders without much baggage.
Yeah.
And Sanders is doing surprisingly well. Hillary's fighting to keep her leads.
Yeah.
But then you have Trump, who is scandalous,
Yeah.
who is winning. So there seems to be almost what's the word, like a national schizophrenia that we have. You know, just there's not a consistency there.
No.
There doesn't seem to be.
No, I completely agree.
And you know, as someone on the right, there's absolutely no question in my mind that Trump has exploited latent racism. Yeah. There's just no question about it. The comments that he has made are vulgar. This isn't because I'm saying it, it's because many on the right, including the whole issue of National Review magazine, have said that he understands that this racism, the xenophobia exists, and he's exploiting.
Absolutely.
You know, China, you know, our trade deals with China aren't, you know, some conspiracy. These deals have been penned and signed off by people on the left and the right, by businesses, you know, by the tens of thousands that would rather make a widget in China than make it here.
Totally.
But he gets up and says, those Chinese, right? Yeah. And there's something in that. Yeah. We've talked about it before. That goes beyond fiscal policy.
Yeah. And I talked about this last week, you know, I mean, I was harassed by white supremacists on Twitter for the past couple weeks, and Trump is their candidate of choice, and I think that says something. They're really sure he's going to usher in this new sort of legacy of white pride.
Right.
Scary.
Well, I have to believe again that, and I was in a meeting last weekend, and I just have to believe that in the consciousness, and maybe I'm a hopeless idealist, but in the deepest core of consciousness, as this field narrows, and people really listen to John Kasich, they really listen to, I'm not going to say Ted Cruz, he's inflammatory, but you know, Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, that they're going to just in their core be able to see how Trump, he is livid. He's not just angry. Yeah. He is undone in a way that I wouldn't want my leader to be.
Yes,
so
right.
You know, just part of leadership is poise,
decorum,
composure, decorum, thoughtfulness, being measured.
Yes.
And to see him going up and just spewing, like spitting on the podium, it makes me nervous that this guy would have the code to launch a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I just, man, I mean, I really hope that people come to their senses on that one.
And I have to say to my Republican friends, I am with, you know, the leaders of the Republican establishment, from Dick Cheney to George W. Bush. You know, I am in that realm of Republicans saying, this guy ain't one of us.
Right.
And so even though I'm on the right here, and some of you might be thinking, wait, you sound like you're on the left. I, as a Republican, say I am increasingly concerned about the idea of someone like Trump running our country. As a Republican.
I think that needs to be said by every Republican, loudly, until it stops.
Right.
All right, what do we have in the week ahead? What are we looking at?
So next week we have the South Carolina primary. I'm not sure where the polls are. I know Trump is up, you know, by 10, 15 points in South Carolina. I know, like I said, that race is going to be ugly. There's a debate, Republican debate, I think on Sunday, Saturday or Sunday. And, you know, you have Hillary and Bernie, you know, posturing, and, you know, it's going to get uglier with them too.
Yeah, interesting.
I read today, maybe one last thing, that Jim Webb, who was one of the nominees who dropped out, and Biden are both kicking themselves, not knowing that Sanders, I mean, everyone thought 3 months ago that the coronation was over and Hillary won.
Right.
And so Biden, I mean, if Biden was in this race,
it'd be interesting.
It would be interesting, and he might be leading in the polls. I think it's very likely.
Yeah, interesting. All right, leave some comments. Let us know what you think, and we will be back next Friday, same time, same place.